Welcome back to Marketing, Management, and Money. I'm your host, Ryan Owens.
I'm your host, Ryan Murray.
So last week, we ended off our conversation about lifestyle entrepreneurs and lifestyle businesses with kind of a big question.
Sure, yeah.
And by kind of, I mean a really big question.
Big enough it's getting its own episode.
Exactly. So here we are, round 2 of lifestyle businesses, except it's kind of transitioning into how do you structure or how do you set up your business, right? In terms of dividing shares and legal aspects and things like that. So that being said, before we dive into this, I would really, really, really like to say that we're going to be talking about some legal topics here, and we are technically not legal advisors. So, please, for the love of everything good and holy, do not use us as your legal consultation resource, whatever.
Really? What's wrong with listening to a podcast from a couple of guys who aren't legal advisors and then, figuring that you're good?
Yes, Judge. I heard them on the radio once, on the podcast. It seemed very professional.
It was just the way they spoke. Something about the way they spoke. I felt good.
I mean, I know I've got a magical voice, but
yeah, we're going to be talking about some things you want to take into consideration when you are structuring your business, and if you do get to this point, get a legal advisor, get someone who's competent to help you. But
yeah,
okay, can I just the first time I hired a legal advisor, this is for one of my own businesses, and I was all grown up now, ready to take it serious, right?
Yeah.
So I had this guy. I sat in one of his, he did a presentation. Phenomenal presenter. Probably not the best attorney, but phenomenal presenter, right?
All right.
So after his presentation, I think to myself, I'm like, oh, hey, I need an attorney, and this guy seems to know what he's doing. Now, let me put something out there. It is so hard to find good small business attorneys.
All right.
Just absolutely difficult. And there's a couple of reasons why. First off, if you're in any rural part of the country, and again, another disclaimer for our international audience, I apologize. I only have experience here in the legal realm with what I have done, in the great state of Utah of the United States.
Right.
So,
might be different in Canada or across the seas in Europe, we don't know.
Yeah, so I apologize for that.
Again, seek your own legal advice.
So, anyway, it's really hard to find a small business expert for a couple of reasons. One is you get into a rural part of the country and you're just going to find family law, criminal law, divorce attorneys, DUI, that kind of stuff. That's all you're going to find. You get into the bigger, the bigger cities, and you are going to find small business attorneys. But it's super hard to find out if they're worth anything because the good ones are really expensive. The adage is true, you get what you pay for. But the problem is when you're seeking legal advice, you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
And so
unless you've done this before, you have no idea what boxes you need to check before you pay somebody a fat old check.
Yeah. And so for me, this was a business I did early on, and we hired this attorney to set up an LLC for us and to create a founder's agreement.
Okay.
I don't remember exactly, but I want to say it was about $800.
Okay.
So seemed reasonable to me. And I'm like, hey, this is cool. So I gave it to the other guy that I was doing business with, had him look over it. And, mind you, I had already paid. And he's looking at this and he's like, have you read this? No, was I supposed to?
Gosh.
Read it. Okay. so many obvious things that we're going to say in
Sure.
this episode. But, he's like, have you read this? I'm like, no, was I supposed to? And he's like, well, there are multiple times where, like, it's not even complete sentences.
Jeez.
Like, are you kidding me? He's like, yeah, it's a little embarrassing.
Like there's sections of it that are still lorem ipsum.
It wasn't quite that bad.
Oh my gosh.
But it was copied and pasted.
This dude saw you coming.
He did. And, almost $1,000 later, I'm hopefully $1,000 smarter.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
hope so.
so anyway, do your homework. The best advice that I can give is to find another business that you trust,
Yes.
who's been in business for a number of years, and get the referral from them. Don't Google search it. Don't
Right.
just, I've got a LinkedIn profile. I can, looking for an attorney. Just talk to someone that you know and trust. Get the referral from them. You might have to do this 2 or 3 times. That's the way to go, right?
Well, Ryan, what if I don't know anybody then? Well, you know what? Get out there and network. Go to an event. Start talking to people. Seriously, like this
Right.
is an in-person type of a conversation that you need to make or have, right?
Absolutely.
This definitely isn't something you do online.
Right.
And so foster a relationship with somebody that, like you said, it has been a business and has a successful business and that you can look up to, vet them. Obviously you're not going to walk up to him and be like, hey, excuse me. You seem like you're doing well. I'm going to subtly critique you for the next 6 months or so. And then I'm going to ask you for who you use as an attorney,
Yeah.
But, yeah, take your time, do it right.
Yeah. Do your homework on this one. So that was a pretty long
Right.
intro tangent.
Right?
Let's pull it back in.
Sure.
The question that you led off with at the end
Yeah.
of last episode.
Well, so I want to come back to the example, right?
Okay.
So it's this small business that's been handed down from generation to generation, right? This one that I referenced in particular, I believe came down from grandpa to dad and then went from dad to his 2 sons. Okay. So it splits at this point. So it's no
All right.
longer just this linear type of progression.
Okay.
And the sons, in my opinion, and they worked with their father and grandfather in getting this all set up, but they went an extremely business type of route, right?
Okay.
When they came into these types of conversations, they were no longer family. There were people there, but they set it up. They brought other people into the ownership level, so it wasn't any longer just the sons.
Right.
There were, I think, 4 people that were ultimately at this ownership level, 2 of which obviously were not quote unquote family. And so how, obviously, so this is one way, right?
Now, can I
Sure.
pause you, because that was at that point. That's actually what sparked my wheels going, because of this common problem of bringing people on at the ownership level.
Yeah.
And that's what I want
It's
to
a
talk
big
about
deal,
here for
right?
a minute.
It's a big decision.
It's
so
a huge decision.
and we kind of talked about this a little bit after the last episode, but whether you're bringing on somebody right up front, if you all of a sudden have this great idea and you're like, oh my gosh, I got to do this. And you're like day 3 into this adventure and you're like, I really, really, really need somebody to come on. That's one ball game, right? But then if you're, your grandfather has been in this game for the last 50 years and you're coming into it new and he's saying, hey, we got to make sure this stays going for another 50 years. So we're going to change some things. They're a little bit different scenarios, but ultimately it's the same thing. It's setting up this business. It's setting out the parameters between individuals within the partnership. How do you do that?
Yeah.
Because holy crap, that's like,
And so we start with what you suggested, and that is identifying what phase of business we're in. Is this startup or is this existing business? And it doesn't
Right.
have to be, passing it on from generation to generation. It's just
Right.
Are you starting from zero, or do you have something established? So let's separate those two, and I want to start with that starting from zero. Now, I totally, when you're talking, Shark Tank is just like flashing through my mind. Because
I have such a love-hate relationship with that show. Like, I thoroughly enjoy it. Honestly, I do. Okay. It's great to watch.
So
yeah.
I have a confession to make.
Okay.
And then I have a funny comparison to make.
Okay. Don't tell me you went on Shark Tank.
No, I've never been on Shark Tank.
Oh.
But I have only sat down and watched Shark Tank one time in my life.
Okay.
I've been doing business consulting for over a decade, and I've sat down and I've watched Shark Tank one time in my life. And it was actually because, the guy I was with, he's like, oh, hey, let's watch Shark Tank. I'm like, oh, cool, that's fine, And so I've had a lot of people that are like, why don't you watch Shark Tank? I'm like, well, it's the same kind of thing as, I don't watch The Bachelor to get dating tips. It's reality TV, guys. Like, this is made for TV. This isn't what 99% of entrepreneurs are doing. And I'm not trying to discredit. There are some solid entrepreneurs who have been on Shark Tank.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
But the process is made for TV. So just keep that in mind. And, if that's your goal, more power to you. So I keep thinking in my mind, Shark Tank. And on Shark Tank, they're just like, I'm going to give you $100,000 and I want 40% of the company.
Yeah.
And they're throwing around these percentages of the company like whatever.
Right.
And I'm like, this is major, because the percentage of the company. So there are a couple important things that you got to keep in mind. One is, where are the final decisions made?
Right.
It's cool when everyone gets along, but what happens when people want to go in different directions?
Mm-hmm.
So if no one has final authority, and I've seen this a lot in small family-owned businesses where it's like, okay, brother and brother have equal authority, and they want to go in different directions, and they're now at a stalemate, and nothing moves forward because they're stuck.
Yeah.
But how do you determine who has the authority? And a lot of times that's held in a percentage. But, in your founder's agreement, are you going to make it that even if I only have 10%, do I still have, decision-making authority? Or do I get trumped by, the guy who has 40%? Or do I have to have the majority percent? Or, and these are things that a lot of times entrepreneurs don't think through on the onset. Is, okay, who has a decision-making authority? But that's a big deal.
Or they do think about them, but they just assume, like, no, I'm the entrepreneur. I get a say.
Yeah.
If you bring somebody else on, not necessarily.
Yeah. I've seen, especially when you bring someone who's experienced.
That's what I was just getting at. Yep. I've seen a guy get burned bad. The dude he brought on ended up walking away with his whole everything he had set up.
And that is unfortunately not that uncommon.
Yeah. It's a shame. It's like, and that's really the repercussions of this. I think that's why this is such an important conversation, and hence why we're doing it twice, right? Because
we didn't get it right the first time,
right? No, because it has a substantial amount of gravity to what happens here. Like, this really is a big deal. Like, you need to get this right. If you don't protect yourself, or you don't set things up in a way that you are comfortable with or agree with, you have the potential of ending up getting hurt pretty bad.
Yeah.
If not completely devastated.
Yeah.
And that is a terrible thing to watch. An entrepreneur who puts their heart and soul and everything they have, time, resources, money, love, everything, sacrifice everything for this, and then have it walk away from them.
Yeah.
It is heartbreaking.
Right.
And there's nothing you can do about it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So this is how I personally like to operate.
Okay.
And And when I'm working with startups, this is usually what I'm recommending. If the company, if there's no money happening, don't take it too serious.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of people that they start divvying out percentages of ownership, and I'm like, you haven't made your first sale.
Right.
So don't worry about it. Now, there's kind of this crossover because once money starts coming, now all of a sudden people are trying to figure out, who gets what and how much. And so I always like to recommend, and this is my approach. And so when I say recommend, there are other ways of doing this, and other people are going to have different approaches. And so, keep that in mind. But I say don't take it too serious on the front end. But then there comes a point where you've got to take it serious and get everything in writing.
Mm-hmm.
And so, if you are working with someone and you don't have a business, but you're working on it, it's okay to just keep working on it and not put
Right.
down, percentages on paper.
Sure.
But once you have something, yeah, you should take the time and you should write it out. Now, whether you choose to get legal advice to write it out, I am of the opinion that your first step should be to write it out without an attorney. And, a lot of times that can get you through that startup phase of the company. And then once the company starts to grow, that's when I personally recommend bringing the attorney on.
Mm-hmm.
Different folks, different strokes. I know some people disagree with that, and I'm okay if you do. I'm not going to fall on my sword on this one.
Yeah, I feel like, oh man, there are like a million different routes that I want to go right now. So first and foremost, I think that you talked about there comes this point, right, where you need to make a decision. You need to put some things down in writing, and I want to emphasize in writing. Don't assume that the other person is a good person. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry. Even if you're best friends, you've lifelong partners, whatever, don't assume, right? Get it in writing. And I think your approach of writing it down by yourself before you include somebody else, even if that's like a day before you include somebody else, but if you put down what your priorities are, what's important to you, going into that conversation is a lot more driven by your approach and much less driven and possibly much less influenced by the experience of the person that you're taking this to. If you take this to a lawyer that's had a ton of experience doing this and they say, well, you're going to want to do X, Y, and Z, you may not care about X, and you may care a whole heck of a lot more about S, and he hasn't even brought up S,
Right. Yeah.
And so it's really important for you to identify what's important to you.
So I feel like we've hit that topic as well as we're going to, especially given the fact that, again, we are not legal counsel, so you're getting kind of our approach on this.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I want to emphasize here is just keeping it real and keeping it at a layman's terms. So, a lot of times when people bring in the attorney, it gets such high level that they lose contact with what's really going on. They're disconnected from the whole process. And so having something written down that's a little bit basic is very helpful. And then if you need to make sure that, that it was done correctly, that's smart as well. Okay, we said that we're going to talk about the startup. What about bringing someone on when you're already in business?
Yeah. So you have this concept of a startup where you have a situation that's like you're basing percentages and value off of this kind of ethereal value, right? This perceived level of this is going to be worth something.
Right. What is it worth today? Crossed. What is it worth tomorrow? And what is it worth 10 years from now?
And yeah, exactly. And so what we're talking about now is it's been 10 years and you or your grandpa or your dad, your sisters, your aunts, whatever, there have been people that put a ton of effort and thought and whatnot into this. even if it's just you yourself, you've put a ton of effort and thought, blood, sweat, and tears, the usual adage. What's that worth? And you bring somebody else on who is new to your circle or new to coming into this level of the company, at least. And what kind of a value do you assign to them? So or allow them to have?
I've seen a lot of people try and get that number right. And I've never seen anyone get it right because it's a shot in the dark. If you think about it, okay, when I'm bringing someone on, I don't know how they're going to perform. I don't know what they're really going to bring to the table. So I kind of like to make sure that there's some tangible resources that are being brought in as opposed to just, oh, yeah, I can do that for you. Oh, yeah, I'll take care of that. Like they need to be bringing something, maybe expanding your customer base, or maybe they are putting some capital into the company. Oh, skin in the game. Man, can I just talk for a second about skin in the game?
Yeah.
If I don't have skin in the game, it means that I'm not that committed. Sweat equity is crap. Just put it out there. If someone comes to you and they want a piece of ownership in your company and all they're bringing to the table is sweat equity, don't do it. I don't care where they graduated from. I don't care how many businesses they've run. I don't care. And here's the thing. If they're that successful, they've got enough money they can put something in.
Sure.
If they don't have any money,
yeah,
then they're not as successful as they're lying to you about. You know? Oh, yeah, I've sold 5 businesses. Well, okay, put 10 grand in. No, I'm not putting 10 grand in. Well, either you don't trust that my business is going anywhere, or you don't have 10 grand to put in. Yeah. So it's just sweat equity. Don't do it. Stay away from it. Sorry, I'm off my soapbox.
So I think there is. I'm going to disagree with you a little bit.
Okay.
I think that giving somebody something, a piece of your company based off of the promise of sweat equity is absolutely wrong. Don't go there.
Okay.
But if I've seen where an individual has been brought in at the ownership level and it's part of their contract that essentially as they gain tenure with the company and prove X, Y, and Z, that they earn pieces of, or percentages rather.
So I can respect that. Me personally, I still won't go there.
Okay. Fair enough.
I just, if you're not putting cold hard cash, you're not getting ownership.
Sure.
Period. That's my hard fast rule.
Now, and I don't think that's bad at all. I think that's smart, right? Yeah, so let's bring it back to the implications of bringing somebody on in general.
Okay. There's something important that we really haven't touched on that I think we need to touch on before we close this one out.
Yeah, or we're going to be running into a third episode.
But I want to point out the fact that anyone that gets ownership in a company, if the company's already established, they are essentially taking ownership away from the existing owners.
Jeez, man, you just opened up a third episode right there. Looking at this from the person coming in and taking the percentage, right?
Yeah. I mean, there is a lot going on here.
How do you be that guy? Man, that's heavy.
And so, the idea is that if I'm going to take a slice of the pie, which makes your slice smaller, the only way that this makes sense is if the pie gets bigger. And so, there's not a right or wrong answer. You're going to want to get some, professional advice if you are in this situation, but just think it through. Think through some of the unintended consequences It's like for those chess players out there, these are discovered moves.
Sure.
And when you move a piece, it opens up other moves that now make the game interesting. And that's what's happening here with ownership. When you move a piece, it's opening up other moves that are making this game more interesting. And you just gotta have that open mind and look at it. There's a lot of people who can help you with that process. So, I think that we've kind of covered this as much as our expertise can go into it.
Yeah, we can give a lot more opinions. I got plenty of those. Is it good advice? Probably not. From this point, it's just going to get whimsical.
All right, so let's cut this off while we feel like we're still ahead.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for tuning in. If you like what you've heard, if you want to comment, if you want to call us out, at MMM Small Biz. That's our Twitter handle. Website is marketingmanagementandmoney.com. Excuse me, marketingmanagementmoney.com. There's no and or ampersand in there. And go ahead and email us, Ryan at marketingmanagementmoney.com.
Take care.